A big welcome to our guest today, Cecilia Hertz, the founder and managing director of Umbilical Design. Cecilia has started or created a project, Space for Wildlife, that brings the insights and the technology from space to conservation. Cecilia, it's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you. I'm happy for being invited.
So, I think the best would be to get started with an introduction. I've now read many of the articles, I've listened to your podcast, I've gone over some of the videos and interviews, and in some of them, you're described as a space designer. Um, what is this? How did you become this? Tell us about Cecilia Hertz.
Thank you. I actually had no intention to work with space from the beginning, but I was luckily one of the students when I was studying industrial design at Lund Institute of Technology in Sweden that could go to NASA Houston Johnson Space Center and meeting all the astronauts. Among them our first Swedish astronaut, Christer Fuglesang, and also all the interdisciplinary teams working with this fantastic space project. I was totally inspired and thought this is what I want to do the rest of my life, actually. So that's how it all started. And I and three other students could do a diploma work about a space vehicle interior. And after that, I moved to Stockholm in Sweden and started my company directly after the master degree of industrial design. So that was way back in 2001, and that's how umbilical design was started originally. So now I'm a space entrepreneur since plus 20 years with a lot of exciting projects in my pocket, so to say. So I have always been fascinated about different kind of extreme environments. We have been working with everything from Svalbard and looking into how we can contribute to their research stations in Svalbard and always looking into new different areas to contribute with the space sector. And when I heard about that 55 elephants and 3 rhinos were killed every day, and also learned a little bit about the rangers and their challenges they have every day, I thought that this must be the new project we could start together, and also with the background of being invited to the Peace Park Sweden event, and with an old friend of mine, Professor Jan Stellon Holstein, it seems definitely as a new project to initiate. And for me personally, I think it's important also to show people that if you see something, you can also do something about it. So I also bring up space for wildlife when I travel around the world and talk about space and innovation. I think it's also a responsibility to spread the word about when you see something is really wrong, and you can do something about it.
So, for the viewers not familiar with Peace Parks Foundation, we're a conservation organization based in Stellenbosch, South Africa, but we operate in multiple countries in Southern Africa. Our primary concern is the development of transfrontier conservation areas, or also known as transboundary landscapes. And in these transboundary landscapes, the development, how we do it is we take on an holistic approach, which is formed with three pillars. The first is conservation, which is the protection and restoration of wild spaces. There's community development, which is to develop or increase the resilience of the communities in these landscapes. And then there's the commercial pillar, which is to make these protected areas and wild space more and more financially sustainable. In general, Peace Parks does a lot of work, and it's very broad and hard to actually capture with just a few sentences. But in general, our aim is conservation at scale. There's a lot more information online on our channels and our website if people would like to dig into the nuts and bolts. But I think back to the work you do. I've read and seen that you've been involved in many industries. You've worked with companies like Volvo, Electrolux, and Bjorn Borg, who you have even got to design very thermal resistant underwear for one of your projects for steel workers. This is really interesting stuff. So, what is the philosophy behind umbilical design and space for wildlife? What do they do and how do they work together?
Happy you brought up actually the strange story of underwear, because it's also you never know where space will take you. So that was also an amazing project where we work with the steel industry, which we have been working with for 10 years or something, and with mission control centers and ideas how we can transfer things to the steel industry. And that's when the underwear came up, as we call the underwear for steel workers. And I actually got the opportunity to give the first pair of the prototype away to Richard Branson when he was in Stockholm. So that was a great opportunity to meet another very fantastic entrepreneur. And then the elephants came into the room, as we say, and people were like, Cecilia, we thought you were focusing on the sustainable city development. But then I said, no, now I understood, when 55 elephants and 3 rhinos are killed every day, of course, the space sector need to put the effort and see how we can contribute in this way. So that was actually to give the background how it all started for space for wildlife. It was when Professor Jan Stalvon Holstein invited me to a Peace Park Sweden event in Stockholm. And that was arranged by Helena Johnson Dahl from Peace Park Foundation in Sweden. And actually, I met Professor John von Holstein in Shanghai when I was arranging the World Expo Space event in the Swedish Pavilion 2010. So it's also very strange how projects get started and how people are interacting with each other. And I know also that von Holstein is also on one of the earlier episodes on Peace Park Foundation. So you can learn more about his amazing work. And actually, after that event, and Helena went to Mozambique in some of her projects with you. And it was a struggle with communication. And then she thought about maybe we should contact Cecilia again. So when she came back to Sweden, she called me and said, "Would you like to do something with me to save the elephants and look into biodiversity from the space perspective and what we can do together?" And of course, indeed, I said yes.
Now that you've got involved with conservation, obviously you spent a lot of time looking at the problems and challenges, of which there are many. What are the main challenges that you see in bringing space and its technology to conservation in Africa, and what are your ideas or plans to overcome them?
Mm. I would say one of the major challenges when it comes to conservation needs, of course, is in Africa is the lack of infrastructure and resources in many regions. And of course, also limited access to reliable internet and electricity. It makes it difficult to implement and sustain high tech solutions. But I would say our strength is to look at opportunities. And also, I would say, since day one, when I entered to NASA in Houston, they have this everything is possible mentality. So I really want to share this on a more global level on how we can come in both with technology and the mindset from the space sector in this project with Space for Wildlife, and also on the more, as we discussed, on the philosophical level. I mean, the elephants, I learned, of course, a lot over the years now that you always work over the borders, because the elephants, of course, they don't see the borders. And you work in very big areas, like geographically 2 times the area of Sweden. So enormous areas. And we also have the same thing with the astronauts. When they look at planet Earth from the space station, they see no borders. So they say we should actually bring the politicians up to the space station so they can look at Earth from another angle, so to say. So I think that's also kind of nice, also more conceptual way of when it comes to communicating the project.
I think this would also then be a good time to focus on your project, which is Space for Wildlife. So, really get into the details here. I recently listened to a podcast with you and Conrad Olsen on Scandinavian Mind. And on the podcast, you two were talking about some of the challenges that you identified and how you were trying to get involved and work with things here. So, you obviously spoke about using camera traps for elephants. You spoke about rangers and how, the challenges they face. And one of the major focuses that I saw is you were staying a lot about on the rangers, who are arguably some of the people who have the toughest conditions to work in. So, following the all of your research, what are the main challenges that you feel that rangers face, and how do you plan going about helping them?
I think it's also, as an industrial designer, one of my major interests has always been to see how can we support people living and working in extreme environments, no matter if they're astronauts or if they're rangers. Um, it's always to look to the needs of people. So what we have seen after workshops with the Peace Parks Combating Wildlife Crime team and also discussions internally, we have detected like five specific areas which we clearly see can benefit from insights and technology from the space sector. And what we see is these five areas is communications, navigations, and surveillance, equipment, and power. And maybe a bit surprisingly, we have decided at least to start looking into a little bit more about equipment to have kind of how can I say it, more the everyday life problems that also could support the rangers in a way. The one of the first project we looked to is tents for the rangers, because when they are out and there is sandstorms, they have problems to close the tents, and then it the snakes comes into the tents. So there is one specific project where we started to look into what space technologies can we add to producing a new kind of tent, with new ways of closing them. And of course we can add a lot of technology as well, like I mean, we have been discussing also like working with drones. That has nothing to do with the tents, of course, but drones and sensors and other ways of more technical insights that will also contribute. But sometimes it's good to start with a project that is really understandable for everyone.
That's wonderful to hear. Most people think space, they think satellites, robots, really high tech things. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of people doing stuff on the ground, and those small changes will have huge impacts on their lives.
I think also we can refer back to the steel workers. When we came in and saw their working environment and we just provided them, we started with this underwear collection, and now we actually have a full series of protective clothes. And I mean, that's fantastic for them, because that means that someone sees them, and then they can do better everyday work. It's like the astronauts. We always want them to have a good a well-being. If we can provide that, people always perform better.
Absolutely. For a ranger who spends the entire day out in the field with rain, harsh sunshine, walking around, to be able to comfortably get into a tent at night and not worry about a snake, those things make a big difference. So, to go more on a global or broader scale, I see that you launched Space for Wildlife at Expo 2020 in Dubai at the Swedish Pavilion. So, how did this go, and how did the global community react to it?
Actually, I was appointed to be the manager of the Space Week in the Swedish Pavilion, and then I thought this would be the excellent platform to launch the Space for Wildlife project, as it really concerns the whole planet. And it was like 192 countries participating with their own pavilions. And it was like a totally amazing week, and we did 51 events in total over these 7 days, where Peace Park was attending the full week, and we had the inauguration by our state secretary Kristen Nilsson from Foreign Trade, and we had representatives from peace parks, both from South Africa and a team of Sweden. So I think it was a fantastic lineup, and we also had Professor Jan Stellon Holstein also arranging workshops for children. And there is a kind of a sweet story in this, because we had produced, or not we was sponsored by Organo Woods, a Swedish company, which had created small rhinos in wood. And so I had 300 rhinos in wood, small ones and three big ones, but they got caught in the customs, the wooden rhinos. So I also had a big challenge to get them out of there in time. So that's, but we managed successfully. We had a lot of happy kids learning about and understanding, of course, about the project, and also painting this wooden rhino. So it was a full activity all the week with kids and so on. So fantastic work, I must say.
Oh, lovely to hear. I think that exposure to conservation at an early age will have a profound effect on how they view it moving forward. How do you see space for wildlife growing? Because, I mean, as you've even seen with your research, there's a lot of challenges ranging from human wildlife conflict, law enforcement, raising capital, assisting the communities in the landscapes. There's a lot going on. Um, how do you see space for wildlife growing, and are there any other aspects of conservation you feel you'd like to get involved with in the future?
Mm. I could say what we can contribute to more specifically is, I mean, we can get companies involved and start like CSR projects around specific selected things, like the tent I mentioned earlier. Um, it could be also that we invite companies that have challenges on their own that can contribute to your work in Africa with other kinds of equipments, or like we discussed before, drones, and that we can develop maybe a drone that works for your challenges in Africa, that we then can use, that the company can use in other extent as well, of course. So we contribute to innovation. I think that's one thing. And another aspect would be, of course, through more holistic approach and the ecosystem thinking and inspiring the younger generation. I think that's very important, where we also could do things like we did at the Expo 2020 in Dubai. Um, so I think that's what we are hoping to do more on developing new innovations and for inspiration. I think that's very important, I would say.
All right. So, with all these ideas, this innovation, and all these wonderful projects and things you want to move forward in the future, for a lot of the people listening in today, what would your advice be to them if they want to start incorporating, space technology and insights into their projects? How should they move forward?
Mm. Actually, during the or after the Expo 2020 in Dubai, I also started a new space company. It's called ISAC, stands for International Space Asset Acceleration Company. Bit long name, but it's also inspired by Isaac Newton. And we think it's really important to accelerate this um, assets from the space sector. So this is what we are focusing on now, and we also got the Swedish astronaut, the first Swedish astronaut, Christer Fuglesang, involved as a co-owner. So we are intending to go more work on a more international level now, and we also have investors coming in, and we are developing an AI solution to better, transfer the knowledge from space to non-space sector. So we think this will also, of course, help a lot our space for wildlife cooperation. So I think we have a lot of hope for the future if we also can bring in more of the global space industry to contribute in these aspects of sustainable development, and also to reach the Agenda 2030 goals. And we will also work more on an online workshops with our innovation partner. I mean, we are really building up a new structure on how we can accelerate the use of space technology. I think that will make a true difference. And we, of course, very much look forward to contribute continuously to the fantastic work you do at Peace Park Foundation.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's great news. At head office, we're all incredibly excited to see where all of this goes in the future, and I think that covers everything for today. Thank you so much for your time, Cecilia. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Fantastic to be here with you, and look forward to continue working together.